Jason? He disappeared completely, which only made me angrier. He got to walk away without dealing with the aftermath, while I was left trying to piece together what was left of my shattered life. I didn't tell anyone else about what happened, not my parents, not her family, not even Tom, though he'd been my rock that night. I didn't want the pity, and I definitely didn't want the endless advice about what I should do. This was my mess, and I had to figure out how to clean it up, or whether it was even worth cleaning. The thing is, part of me wanted to believe her. Part of me wanted to take her at her word when she said it was a mistake, that it was a moment of weakness she deeply regretted. I wanted to believe that we could fix this, that the love we'd shared wasn't completely gone. But the other part of me, that part couldn't forget the look on her face when I walked into that room, the way she laughed with him, the way she didn't push him away. So, I started focusing on myself. At first, it wasn't intentional. I just needed something to distract me from the constant loop of doubt and betrayal playing in my head. I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects and staying late at the office. I signed up for a gym membership, not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I needed to burn off the anger simmering inside me. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, things started to change. The gym became a sanctuary. Each session was a release. Every weight I lifted, another ounce of pain I let go. I started running, pushing myself further and faster every day. At first, it was just about the physical challenge, but it soon became something more. With every mile, I felt stronger, not just in my body, but in my mind. I also reconnected with old friends, people I drifted away from during my relationship with Clara, not because of her, but because I'd been so consumed by building a life with her. It was refreshing to talk to people who didn't see me as Clara's husband, but as just Michael. And then there were the small things, the ones I'd forgotten could bring joy, cooking dinner for myself without worrying about someone else's preferences, reading a book late into the night without feeling guilty about keeping the light on, taking spontaneous weekend trips to clear my head. For the first time in years, I was rediscovering who I was outside of Clara. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were nights when the loneliness hit me like a freight train, when I'd find myself staring at her side of the bed, wondering how things had gone so wrong. There were days when I doubted whether I was making the right choice, when her tearful apologies echoed in my mind, tempting me to give her another chance. What really pushed me forward, though, was a realization I had during one of those sleepless nights. I'd spent so much of our relationship trying to prove myself, to Clara, to Jason, to everyone who ever doubted me. But for what? Love isn't supposed to be a competition, and it's definitely not supposed to feel like a test you're constantly failing. That's when I knew. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone else. It was about proving to myself that I deserved better. Better than being treated like an afterthought. Better than being overshadowed by someone who didn't respect me. Better than being in a relationship where I had to fight for a place in my own wife's heart. And so, piece by piece, I started rebuilding my life. Not a life I'd imagined with Clara, but a new one. One that didn't revolve around someone else's validation. One where I could stand on my own 2 feet, knowing my worth without needing anyone to tell me. By the time I saw Clara again months later, I was a different man, stronger, calmer, wiser. And though she begged me one last time to come back, I realized something that surprised even me. I didn't want to. For the first time in years, I felt free. And that freedom? It was worth every ounce of pain it took to get there. Months passed, but the memories of that night never truly left me. They lingered in quiet moments, unbidden, like a shadow I couldn't quite shake. But those months were also transformative. Each day I grew stronger, not just physically, but emotionally. I began to find pieces of myself that had been buried under years of doubt and insecurity, and with each piece, I rebuilt. I hadn't seen or spoken to Clara in weeks when the email came, a simple subject line. Can we talk? I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Her message was short, almost tentative. She wanted to meet, not to ask me to come back, she claimed, but to apologize. I need to say it face to face, she wrote. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to leave her words unread and move on. But another part, the part that still carried fragments of love for the woman I thought she was, felt compelled to hear her out. So, I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe, the kind we used to visit together on lazy Sunday mornings. She looked different, tired, thinner, like she'd been carrying the weight of her choices as much as I had. For a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy, but then I reminded myself why we were here. Michael, she began, her voice soft. Thank you for coming. I didn't respond immediately, waiting for her to continue. She hesitated, her hands trembling slightly as she toyed with the edge of her napkin. I don't expect you to forgive me. Honestly, I'm not sure I deserve it. But I needed to tell you how sorry I am for everything. For what I did to us, for what I did to you. Her words were sincere, but they didn't have the impact she might have hoped. Apologies, no matter how heartfelt, don't undo the damage. They don't erase the pain or restore the trust. Still, I nodded. I appreciate you saying that, I said, keeping my tone measured. She went on, explaining how she'd let herself get swept up in Jason's charisma, how she'd taken our relationship for granted. I didn't realize what I had until I lost it, she admitted, her voice breaking. You didn't deserve what I did to you. I didn't argue. She was right. I didn't. But I also didn't feel the need to rehash everything. I'd made peace with what happened, as much as anyone can make peace with betrayal. Clara, I said finally, I'm glad you're taking responsibility for your actions. But this isn't about me forgiving you. It's about me moving on. Her tears came then, quiet and steady. I understand, she whispered. I hope you find happiness. You deserve it. The words hung in the air, and for the first time, I felt something close to closure. Not because of her apology, but because I realized I didn't need it. I'd already found my peace. As for Jason, karma caught up with him in ways I hadn't expected. Words spread about what happened between us, and his once flawless reputation began to crumble. Friends distanced themselves, and he lost a major client at work when they got wind of his involvement in my wedding night debacle. It wasn't poetic justice, it wasn't even satisfying, but it was enough. One day, I ran into him at the gym. His jaw, still slightly off from where I'd broken it, was a visible reminder of that night. He avoided my gaze, muttering a half-hearted "hey" as he passed. I didn't respond. Jason wasn't worth my energy anymore. My own life, though, was moving forward in ways I couldn't have imagined. I met someone. Her name was Rachel. She was nothing like Clara. Where Clara was fiery and magnetic, Rachel was calm and steady, the kind of person who didn't need to dominate a room to leave an impression. Our connection was slow, organic, built on mutual respect and trust. When I finally told Rachel about what had happened with Clara, she listened without judgment. You've been through a lot, she said, taking my hand. But it sounds like you've grown even more because of it. She was right. The betrayal that once felt like the end of my world had become a turning point, a chance to rediscover myself, and what I truly deserved. One day, months later, I saw Clara again. She was sitting in a coffee shop, staring out the window, her expression unreadable. For a moment, I considered going in, saying hello. But then Rachel called my name, and I turned to see her walking toward me, her smile as warm as ever. I smiled back and walked away, leaving Clara and the past behind for good. I had a future to look forward to, one I'd built on my own terms. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. I can't tell you the exact moment I knew Clara was the one. Maybe it was her laugh, warm and infectious, the kind that made strangers stop to smile. Or maybe it was the way she tilted her head when she listened, her eyes locking onto mine like nothing else in the world mattered. All I know is that from the day we met, my life felt fuller, like she filled a space I didn't even know was empty. We met at my friend Sam's wedding. I was standing awkwardly by the bar, sipping something cheap and fizzy, when she walked in. She was late, her hair slightly windswept, her dress a swirl of blue that made her look like she just stepped out of a movie. I was too stunned to speak, but fate, or Sam's overly enthusiastic cousin, brought her to my table during the reception. "Michael, meet Clara." "Clara, this is Michael. You two should talk," the cousin had said with a wink, before disappearing into the crowd. We did talk, about everything from her love of art to my fumbling attempts at cooking, from books we'd both read to places we dreamed of visiting. Hours slipped by unnoticed, and by the time the night ended, I knew she was someone I didn't want to let go of. The weeks that followed were nothing short of magical. Clara had this uncanny ability to make the mundane feel extraordinary. A simple walk in the park became an adventure when she'd stop to admire the tiniest wild flower or laugh at a dog chasing its tail. Dinner at a cheap diner felt like fine dining when she'd steal fries off my plate with a mischievous grin. For the first time in my life, I felt seen, truly seen. She didn't just listen to me, she understood me, my quirks, my fears, my dreams. She encouraged me to apply for the job I thought was out of my league, celebrated every small victory like it was a grand achievement meant, and never hesitated to call me out when I doubted myself. Of course, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. Clara was fiercely independent, and sometimes I struggled to find my footing beside her confidence. But she never made me feel lesser. Instead, she pulled me into her world and made me believe I belonged there. I proposed on a quiet Sunday morning over coffee and pancakes. No grand gestures or elaborate plans, just me, a ring, and a question. Her yes was immediate, her smile brighter than I'd ever seen. Looking back, those early days feel like a dream. I truly believed we were unbreakable, that our love was a force no one could challenge. But I had no idea what was holding her just a little too close for comfort. When I brought it up to Clara, she waved it off. "Michael, you're overthinking this. Jason is like a brother to me. He's harmless." But harmless didn't feel like the right word. Jason wasn't just an overprotective brother figure. He was a looming shadow, constantly reminding me that he thought I didn't measure up. The worst part? He didn't even try to hide it. One night, when we were out for dinner with friends, Jason leaned across the table and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "You know, Clara, I've always said you deserve someone who can challenge you. You like a little F in your life." His eyes flicked to me, his smirk growing. "But hey, maybe quiet stability is what you need now. We all grow up eventually." The laughter that followed hit me harder than I cared to admit. Clara quickly changed the subject, but I could see the faint blush on her cheeks. Embarrassment? Amusement? I wasn't sure, and that uncertainty gnawed at me. Jason's presence in our lives wasn't just an annoyance. It was a constant reminder of everything I feared I wasn't. Clara's assurance is that it didn't mean anything started to feel hollow, and deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jason wasn't harmless at all. He was waiting. For what? I didn't know, but it was enough to make me question how solid my place in Clara's life really was. I'd like to say I handled Jason's presence with grace. I'd like to say shrugged off his barbs, that Clara's reassurances were enough to keep my doubts at bay. But the truth? The truth is that Jason became a wedge, an ever-present reminder of my deepest insecurities. It wasn't just what he said, it was the way he said it, the way he carried himself, and how Clara seemed to dismiss it all so effortlessly. Take the wedding planning, for example. It should have been one of the happiest times of my life, right? Picking out flowers, tasting cakes, planning for the day we'd commit to forever. Instead, it became another stage for Jason to strut onto. He offered to help Clara with decorations, saying, "I know you need someone with a good eye. No offense, Michael. No offense." That was his favorite way to soften the blows, as if adding those two little words erased the sting. "And Clara?" She laughed. She laughed. "Michael has great taste, Jason. Don't be ridiculous." But then she let him tag along to the florist, the venue, the caterer. "He's just being supportive," she told me when I questioned it. Supportive of her, maybe. Me? Not so much. The bachelor party was another disaster. My best man, Tom, planned a low-key evening. Just the guys, some drinks, and a poker table. Simple, perfect. But Jason couldn't leave it alone. "This is it?" he asked, looking around like he just walked into a library. "Come on, Michael, live a little. This is your last night of freedom." He went on to regale us with tales of wild bachelor parties he'd been to, complete with stories of things no fiancé would want to hear. I clenched my jaw and stayed silent, but when he pulled me aside later, his smirk was almost unbearable. "You know," he said, swirling the whiskey in his glass, "Clara's always been the kind of woman who needs excitement. I hope you can keep up with that. Not everyone can." He clapped me on the shoulder, hard enough to make me stumble, and walked away before I could respond. I told Claire about it the next day, expecting her to take my side. "Jason told me I can't keep up with you," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "Oh, Michael," she replied, shaking her head with that patient smile that made me feel like a child. "He's just teasing. He doesn't mean it. You know how he is." But I didn't. I didn't know how someone could be so dismissive of the person I was supposed to marry, so intent on undermining me at every turn. And I didn't know how Clara could continue to let it slide. I started to notice the small things more. The way Jason leaned in too close when he talked to Clara, the way her laughter was a little louder when he was around. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe I was letting my insecurities get the best of me. But the doubt was there, creeping in like a slow fog, clouding everything I thought I knew about us. The worst part? I felt like I couldn't say anything anymore. Every time I brought up Jason, it turned into a conversation about me, my insecurities, my inability to trust her. "Michael, I love you," she'd say, exasperated. "Why can't you just let this go?" Why couldn't I? Because every time Jason was in the room, I felt like the third wheel in my own relationship. Because every comment he made chipped away at the foundation we were building. And because deep down, I knew Jason wasn't just testing me. He was testing Clara too. And I wasn't sure how much longer either of us could hold out. I woke up on my wedding day feeling like I was floating. This was it, the day I dreamed about for months, maybe even years. Claire and I had worked so hard to make everything perfect, from the tiny details like the floral arrangements to the playlist for the reception. I wanted it all to reflect us. Our love, our journey, our promise to each other. I spent the morning getting ready with my groomsmen, laughing and reminiscing about old times. They teased me about how nervous I looked, but it wasn't nerves, it was excitement. This was the moment where everything became official. The rest of my life was about to begin. And then Jason walked in. "Morning, groom," he said with that trademark grin, as though he were the star of the day. He was dressed sharply, his tuxedo fitting him like he'd been poured into it. He looked every bit the guy who belonged at the center of attention, and for a second, I wondered if he knew it wasn't his turn today. "Ready to lock it down?" he asked, clapping me on the back, hard as usual. "You're a lucky man, Michael. Clara's, well, she's one of a kind." There was something about the way he said it, a pause between the words as if he were choosing them carefully. Or maybe not. Maybe he was just saying what he always said, laced with that undercurrent of smug superiority. I know I'm lucky, I replied, trying to keep my voice even. I wanted to believe it was a compliment, but coming from Jason, it always felt like a challenge. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Clara was radiant as she walked down the aisle, her smile lighting up the room. When her eyes met mine, I felt a lump in my throat and the kind of love that makes everything else in the world disappear. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not Jason, not the whispers of doubt I tried to bury, not anything but her and the life we were about to start together. Still, I couldn't help noticing Jason's smirk as Clara joined me at the altar. He was standing in the front row, his arms crossed, like he was waiting for something. For what? I didn't know, and I told myself I didn't care. Today was about Clara and me, not him. His speech at the reception, though, that was harder to brush off. To Clara and Michael, he began, raising his glass. The perfect couple. And I mean that. You balance each other out so well, Clara with her passion and fire, and Michael with his steadiness. The room laughed politely, but I could feel my face flush. Clara's smile faltered for just a second, and she reached for my hand under the table. I squeezed it, grateful for the gesture, but it didn't ear as the sting of his words. And Michael, Jason continued, his tone dripping with that faux sincerity I'd grown to hate. Thank you for taking such good care of Clara. She's a gem, and not just anyone could handle her. But you, well, you're doing your best. The laughter this time was louder, more genuine, and I couldn't bring myself to look at him. Clara leaned in close, whispering, "Ignore him. He's just being Jason." I tried. I really tried, but every word felt like another crack in the facade of this perfect day. As the evening wore on, I focused on Clara, on her smile, on the way she moved through the room, making every guest feel welcome. She was my wife now. My wife. Nothing Jason said or did could change that. Still, there were moments that lingered. The way Jason held her hand a little too long when they danced, the way his eyes followed her across the room. Maybe it was all in my head. Maybe I was just overthinking everything. But as Clara leaned over to kiss my cheek, whispering, "I'm the luckiest woman alive," I couldn't shake the feeling that Jason was watching, waiting. And for the first time that day, I felt a pang of unease that I couldn't quite explain. It was our wedding day, the happiest day of my life, and yet somewhere deep down, I couldn't help but feel like the shadow Jason cast over us wasn't going away anytime soon. The reception was winding down, the crowd thinning as guests gave their final congratulations and started heading home. I was still riding the high of the day. Clara's radiant smile as we exchanged vows, the laughter during the toasts, the way she'd looked at me during our first dance. I'd replay those moments in my mind forever. "Michael, I'm heading upstairs to freshen up," Clara whispered, brushing her hand against my arm. She smelled faintly of the roses in her bouquet, and her lips curled into that soft smile that made me fall for her in the first place. "Stay and thank everyone, okay? I'll meet you soon." "Of course," I replied, stealing a quick kiss before she disappeared into the crowd. I watched her walk away, the delicate train of her dress sweeping the floor. My wife. The word still felt unreal. I returned to the guests, shaking hands and accepting hugs. The air buzzed with joy and chatter as people shared stories about the day, praising how everything had gone perfectly. Perfect. That's what I thought this night would be, what it should have been. But something tugged at the back of my mind, an uneasiness I couldn't quite place. Maybe it was the way Clara had rushed off, a slight edge to her voice I couldn't explain. Or maybe it was just exhaustion catching up with me. I pushed the thought aside and focused on the well-wishers. "Beautiful ceremony, Michael," one guest said. "Clara's a lucky woman." "No, I'm the lucky one," I replied, meaning every word. As the crowd dwindled further, I checked my watch. 20 minutes had passed since Clara went upstairs. It wasn't unusual. Brides have a lot to manage on their big day. But the nagging feeling in my chest grew stronger. I told myself I was being paranoid, a little on edge from the whirlwind of emotions. After all, she was just upstairs, probably adjusting her hair or taking a breather. Still, I couldn't ignore the way my gut twisted. I decided to head up and check on her. Not because I didn't trust her, of course I trusted her, but because, well, I don't know. Something felt off. The elevator ride felt slower than usual, the quiet hum of the machinery doing little to settle my nerves. When I stepped into the hallway, everything was still, almost eerily so. Our suite was at the end of the corridor, and as I walked toward it, my heart started pounding harder, though I couldn't say why. I reached the door and hesitated. Maybe I should have knocked, given her a moment to compose herself. But something made me turn the handle instead, gently pushing the door open. The suite was dark, except for the faint light spilling in from the bathroom. "Clara," I called softly. No answer. I stepped inside, my shoes silent on the plush carpet. The stillness of the room was deafening, every second dragging out longer than it should. And then I heard it. Voices, quiet, muffled, but unmistakable. One was hers, light and melodic, the way she always sounded when she was nervous. The other was deeper, smooth, and confident. My chest tightened. The voices were coming from the bedroom. "Clara," my voice was louder this time, more insistent. The sound of laughter froze me in place. Not nervous laughter, playful, intimate. I moved toward the bedroom door, each step heavier than the last. My hand trembled as I reached for the knob. Part of me wanted to turn around, to convince myself I was imagining things. But the other part, the part that knew better, couldn't let it go. What I found behind that door would change everything. I opened the bedroom door, and the world I knew came crashing down in an instant. There they were, Clara and Jason. The sight hit me like a freight train. My beautiful, radiant wife, still in her wedding dress, was perched on the edge of the bed, her face inches from his. His jacket was off, his tie loosened, and the smirk I'd grown to despise was plastered across his face. For a moment, neither of them noticed me. They were too wrapped up in their own little bubble. Clara was laughing, that soft, melodic laugh I used to think was mine alone. Jason leaned closer, his hand brushing against her knee like he had every right to be there. My fists clenched involuntarily, my nails digging into my palms. "Clara," I said, my voice cutting through the room like a blade. It wasn't loud, but it was enough. They both froze. Clara's head snapped toward me, her eyes wide with shock and something else I couldn't quite place. Guilt? Fear? Jason, on the other hand, barely flinched. He leaned back casually, like I just interrupted a friendly conversation instead of the betrayal unfolding before my eyes. "Michael," Clara stammered, standing up quickly. It's not what it looks like. Not what it looks like. The oldest, most pathetic excuse in the book. My chest burned, a mix of rage and heartbreak twisting inside me like a knife. "Really?" I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to stay calm. "Because it looks like my wife, on our wedding night, is cawing up to the guy who spent the last year treating me like I'm not good enough for her." Jason finally spoke, his tone dripping with smug indifference. "Relax, man. We were just talking. Nothing happened." He stood up, towering over me as if daring me to make a move. I couldn't hold back any longer. Months, years of frustration, doubt, and anger boiled over in an instant. I swung before I even realized what I was doing, my fist connecting with Jason's jaw with a sickening crunch. He stumbled back, clutching his face, the cocky smirk wiped clean off. "Michael, stop!" Clara screamed, rushing toward me. She grabbed my arm, but I shook her off. My breathing was ragged, my vision blurred with fury. Jason groaned, staggering to his feet, but he didn't come at me. No, he just looked at me with this twisted combination of shock and amusement, as if even now he thought he had the upper hand. "I've warned you about this guy," I spat, glaring at Clara. "I told you he didn't respect our relationship. I told you he wanted to tear us apart. And you?" My voice cracked, the betrayal too raw to contain. "You defended him. You let him in." Tears streamed down Clara's face, her hands trembling as she reached for me. "Michael, please, you have to believe me. He means nothing to me. I don't know why I—" She choked on her words, unable to finish. "Why you what, Clara?" I snapped. "Why you invited him into our room on our night? Why you let him sit there, touching you, laughing with you, while I was downstairs thanking our guests?" Her silence was deafening. Jason, still rubbing his jaw, decided to add his 2 cents. "You're overreacting, Michael. You've always been insecure about me and Clara. Maybe if you trusted her." I didn't let him finish. "You don't get to lecture me about trust, Rust," I snarled, my voice shaking with rage. "You've been trying to undermine me since the day we met. But this is on another level." Clara collapsed onto the bed, sobbing into her hands. For a brief second, I felt a pang of pity, but it was quickly swallowed by the overwhelming weight of betrayal. How could she? How could he? The room felt suffocating, the air thick with emotions too volatile to name. I couldn't stay there. "I'm done," I said finally, my voice hollow. "I don't know who you are anymore, Clara. And you," I pointed at Jason, "if I see you again, you won't just lose your smirk, you'll lose your teeth." I turned and walked out, leaving Clara's cries and Jason's stunned silence behind me. As I stepped into the hallway, the weight of what I just witnessed hit me like a tidal wave. This was supposed to be the happiest night of my life, the beginning of forever. Instead, it felt like the end of everything I'd believed in. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do next. All I knew was that nothing would ever be the same again. I don't remember how I ended up in the hotel bar. One minute I was storming out of that room, out of the betrayal, out of everything I thought my life was supposed to be, and the next, I was sitting alone in a corner booth with a drink I didn't even order. The bartender must have sensed I needed it, or maybe I just looked like a man who'd hit rock bottom. The drink burned going down, but it didn't numb the ache in my chest. Nothing could. My mind was a storm of images, Clara's guilty eyes, Jason's smirk, the sound of their laughter echoing in my ears. It was like watching a nightmare unfold on repeat, except this one was real, and I couldn't wake up. People around me were still celebrating, yelling in glasses and toasting to love, completely unaware of the implosion that had just happened upstairs. I wanted to scream, to tell everyone that the perfect couple they just watched get married was a sham. But instead, I sat there staring into my glass like it held answers to questions I didn't even know how to ask. Clara texted me, of course, multiple times. At first, it was frantic apologies. "Michael, please come back. Let me explain. It's not what you think, I swear. It wasn't serious. I love you. Don't throw this away because of one stupid mistake." And then, when I didn't respond, the messages shifted. "You're being unfair. You won't even hear me out. Jason didn't mean anything. He was just being Jason. Where are you? We need to talk about this like adults." Like adults? Was she serious? Adults don't sneak off with their ex or whatever Jason was on their wedding night. Adults don't laugh with the man who spent the last year making their husband feel like less than nothing. No, I wasn't the one acting like a child here. I finally turned my phone off. I couldn't deal with her excuses, not tonight, not after what I'd seen. Hours passed, or maybe just minutes. Time felt meaningless. At some point, Tom, my best man, found me. "There you are," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "I've been looking everywhere. What the hell happened? You look like someone ran over your dog." I didn't answer right away. How could I even begin to explain? Eventually, I just blurted it out, "Clara and Jason. Upstairs. Together." Tom froze, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to anger in the span of a few seconds. "Are you kidding me?" he asked, his voice low and sharp. "On your wedding night?" I nodded, and that was all it took for the floodgates to open. I told him everything. Jason's constant digs, Clara's dismissals, the moment I walked into that room and my whole world fell apart. By the time I was done, Tom looked like he was ready to storm upstairs and finish what I'd started. "What are you going to do?" he asked after a long silence. I don't know," I admitted, my voice hollow. "I can't go back to her, not after this. But we just got married. How do you even start to unravel that?" Tom didn't have an answer, and neither did I. I spent the rest of the night in that booth, alternating between anger and despair. At one point, I wondered if I'd missed something, if there had been signs I chose to ignore because I wanted so badly to believe in Clara and US. But no matter how many times I went over it in my head, I couldn't understand how we'd ended up here. By the time I finally left the bar, the hotel was silent, the party long over. I walked through the empty hallways, every step heavy with exhaustion and heartbreak. I couldn't bring myself to go back to our suite, so I found an empty lounge and collapsed onto a couch. As I stared up at the ceiling, the reality of it all sank in. This wasn't just a fight or a misunderstanding. This was betrayal, plain and simple. Clara and Jason had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and I didn't know if I had it in me to forgive them, or if I even wanted to. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, heard her laugh, felt the sting of Jason's smug grin. My wedding night, the night that was supposed to be the happiest of my life, had turned into a waking nightmare. And as dawn broke over the city, I realized something. The man who walked into that ceremony full of hope and love wasn't coming back. By the time I stood up and started walking out of that lounge, I wasn't the same person anymore. Clara had taken the best parts of me and crushed them in one careless, selfish moment. And now, I had to figure out what came next. I didn't leave Clara immediately. I know that sounds weak, pathetic even, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. Walking away from someone you've built your life around isn't as simple as storming out of a room or saying, "I'm done." It's a slow process, like peeling off a bandage one agonizing inch at a time. Besides, I wanted answers. I needed to understand how she could throw away everything we had in one selfish moment. For the first few weeks after that night, we lived in this weird limbo. She apologized constantly, cycling through tears, excuses, and desperate promises. It didn't mean anything, she said over and over, as if repeating it enough would make it true.